17 years, 3 kids, a life I believed was solid. That was the number I kept repeating in my head the afternoon everything cracked open. 17 years of early mornings, burnt coffee beans, late-night inventory spreadsheets, and believing loyalty worked both ways. Then I found an invitation in my husband's car, and my name wasn't on it. My name is Michelle Harrison. I'm 43 years old, and for nearly 18 years, I've built something I thought mattered. 3 coffee franchises across the metro. My name on every lease. My sweat in every foundation. Not glamorous work, not the kind that ends up in glossy magazines or corporate networking dinners. But it was honest work, the kind that lets you sleep at night. Or at least it used to. I met Daniel Collins 21 years ago. He was 20, ambitious, smooth, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were the only person there. I was 22 and stubborn enough to believe love could outlast anything. Back then, I didn't have businesses or investors or commercial leases. I had a tiny apartment above a laundromat and a dream of opening a cafe where people actually wanted to stay. Daniel had bigger plans. He talked about corporate ladders, executive titles, and glass office buildings. Somehow our worlds fit together, or at least they did for a long time. A year after we met, we had our first child, Madison. She's 19 now, a sophomore studying biology at State University 3 hours away. Old enough to understand that marriages aren't always what they look like in photographs. Daniel and I had 2 more kids after that. 17 years together. 3 kids. A mortgage. A life built piece by piece. I thought it was stable. I thought it was real. Daniel works as a sales director for MedTech Solutions. He makes a 6-figure salary. He flies to conferences, shakes hands with hospital administrators and doctors, and talks to people who treat profit margins like a competitive sport. 3 weeks ago, he told me he was getting promoted. Not officially yet, but the announcement was coming. Vice President of Sales, corner office, company car, the kind of title his parents had always imagined for him. I remember smiling when he told me. I remember hugging him. I remember thinking this was one of those moments couples celebrate together. Apparently, I was wrong. I found the invitation on a Tuesday morning. Pure accident. I was looking for my insurance card because we'd talked about adding Daniel's car to my policy. Save a few $100s a year. I leaned into the passenger seat and reached down between the center console. That's when I saw it. Cream-colored paper, heavy stock, the kind of expensive stationery companies use when they want to look impressive. It was wedged between the seat and the console like it had slipped out of an envelope. I pulled it out. The gold lettering caught the sunlight. MedTech Solutions cordially invites you to celebrate Daniel Collins' promotion to Vice President of Sales, November 15th, 7 p.m., the Metropolitan Club. Dinner and reception to follow. I stood there for a moment reading it again. Then I opened the folded insert inside. The seating chart, alphabetical by last name. Daniel Collins, 2 seats at table 3. His parents were listed, his sister and her husband, several executives from MedTech, and one more name, Emily Parker. I stared at it because the seat next to Daniel, the seat that should have been mine, belonged to someone else. Emily Parker, his ex-girlfriend, the woman he dated all through college, the woman his parents had always preferred, the woman who used to look at me like I was an inconvenience. My name wasn't anywhere on the list. Not at table 3. Not at any table. I stood in the driveway holding that invitation for a long time. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. Not from anger. Not yet. Just that hollow feeling you get when you realize you might have been background noise in your own marriage. Daniel came outside about 20 minutes later. Coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other. Already answering emails. He didn't notice me at first. When he finally looked up, his smile froze for a fraction of a second. "Hey, babe," he said. "I thought you already left for the Riverside shop." I didn't answer. I just held up the invitation. His expression shifted. Something complicated passed across his face. Not quite guilt. Not quite defiance. Something in between. "Oh," he said. "Just that. Oh, they sent that already." "They?" I repeated. "Your promotion celebration. The one I'm apparently not invited to." Daniel set his mug on the hood of the car like he needed both hands for this conversation. I watched him cycle through several expressions before settling on something halfway between apologetic and defensive. "Michelle," he said carefully, "it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." I kept my voice calm. Because calm scares people more than anger. "What I think," I continued, "is my husband just got promoted to vice president, and somehow I'm not invited to celebrate it." Daniel crossed his arms. That's his tell. He does that right before saying something he knows I won't like. "My parents requested the seating arrangements," he said. "You know how my dad is about corporate events. He's very particular about optics." Optics. The word tasted strange. "Your father cares about optics so much that your wife of 17 years doesn't make the guest list?" Daniel sighed. It's complicated, Michelle. Then make it simple. I looked directly at him. Who's sitting in my seat? His eyes flicked toward the street, then back at me. They thought Emily should be there. For a moment, I didn't react. I just let the name settle in the air between us. Emily Parker, the woman who used to send Daniel long emotional emails during our first year together. The woman his mother once described as more his type. Emily, I repeated slowly, your ex-girlfriend. She's consulting with MedTech right now, Daniel said quickly. She's helping restructure some hospitality partnerships for our corporate events division. That's great, I said. Wonderful, actually. But that still doesn't explain why she gets a seat at your celebration and I don't. Daniel's jaw tightened. My parents like her. Okay. They think she's more their speed. The rest of the sentence hung there without being spoken. More polished, more corporate, more acceptable. Running 3 coffee shops apparently didn't impress people like them. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then something colder than anger moved through me. A quiet clarity. So let me make sure I understand, I said. Your parents prefer your ex to your wife of 17 years. And instead of telling them that's insane, you went along with it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you. He didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. That night I went to work. The Riverside location needed me. Honestly, I needed it more. Busy hands help you think. Between pulling espresso shots and signing vendor invoices, I kept replaying that invitation in my head. Emily Parker. Table 3, 7 p.m. The Metropolitan Club. Around 2 in the afternoon, I stepped into the back office and picked up my phone. I called Gerald Simmons. Gerald is 68, sharp as a razor. He's been my accountant since I opened my first cafe, and he knows my books better than anyone alive. He answered on the second ring. Michelle, he said, what can I do for you? I closed the office door. Gerald, I need you to pull something for me. What kind of something? All joint account activity for the last 2 years. He paused. Gerald has known me a long time. He can hear trouble before it's spoken. Everything? He asked. Checking savings investments, I said. Anything Daniel and I share. And Gerald? Yes? If something looks odd, don't wait to tell me. There was a silence on the other end. Finally, he said, I'll have it for you by Thursday. That evening, Daniel came home late. He said he'd been in a strategy meeting. He kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, like we hadn't had the strangest conversation of our marriage that morning. Later, while we were cleaning up after dinner, he said casually, Emily called today. I looked up from the sink. Oh? She just wanted to confirm details about Friday's event. Too casual. Way too casual. Emily, I repeated. Yes. My voice stayed neutral. Your ex-girlfriend. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. Michelle, please don't start. Start what? You know, he said. Being like this. Like what? I turned the faucet off. Like a woman who just found out she was replaced by her husband's ex at the biggest night of his career? You haven't been replaced, Daniel said quickly. You're being dramatic. Maybe, but something deep in my chest told me otherwise. Because timing matters, and a strange coincidence had been bothering me all week. When did Emily start consulting for MedTech? I asked. Daniel frowned. I don't remember exactly. 6 months, 7? Something inside me tightened. Because 6 months ago, my Riverside location had started losing contracts. Corporate clients suddenly switching to a brand new cafe across town. Sleeker branding, lower prices. A place called Velocity Cafe. At the time, I'd told myself it was competition. Normal business pressure. But now the timing didn't feel like coincidence. Not at all. And somewhere deep in my gut, a quiet voice whispered, something bigger is happening, and you're only just starting to see it. I barely slept that night. Not because Daniel and I fought. We didn't. That was the part that kept scraping at me. He acted like everything was manageable, temporary, a misunderstanding I was supposed to swallow because his father cared about appearances, and his ex-girlfriend happened to fit more neatly into whatever polished version of his life he wanted the world to see. Daniel slept beside me like a man with nothing to hide. Arm under his pillow. Steady breathing. Phone face down on the nightstand. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles in the dark, and thought about how betrayal almost never arrives looking dramatic. It doesn't always slam a door. Sometimes it adjusts its tie, kisses your cheek, and tells you you're overreacting. By morning, I had a headache behind my eyes and a calmness that didn't belong to exhaustion. It belonged to instinct. The kind I'd learned building a business from scratch. The kind that tells you when numbers don't add up, when a vendor's story is too smooth, when a smiling customer is about to walk without paying. I got up before Daniel, made coffee, fed the dog, checked inventory reports from the downtown location. Every movement felt ordinary. That was the strangest part. My life was splitting open, and the dishwasher still needed unloading. Daniel came downstairs around 7:30 in a pressed blue shirt, tie loosened, expensive watch catching the kitchen light. He looked handsome, successful, like the kind of man who belonged in executive photos and champagne receptions. For 1 weak second, I hated myself for noticing. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter like nothing between us had shifted. "You heading to Riverside first?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded. "I'll be late tonight. Final prep for Friday." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "Of course." His eyes flicked to mine, gauging tone, risk, temperature. Then he gave me a tired smile, the one that used to work on me when we were younger and had no money, and still believed hard weeks were proof of devotion. "I know you're upset," he said, "but I need you not to make this bigger than it already is." That did something to me. Not loudly, quietly, like a lock turning. "I'm not making anything bigger, Daniel," I said. "I'm just finally looking at it." He frowned like that answer inconvenienced him. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, too fast for me to see the name. But I noticed the change in his face. A quick alertness, a private tension. He turned the screen down and picked up his keys. "I'll call you later," he said. He kissed my forehead and left. I stood in the kitchen long after the front door closed, staring at the coffee maker, at the place where steam curled upward in thin white threads. Then I picked up my own phone and opened the calendar. November 15th, Friday, 7 p.m., the Metropolitan Club. I entered a note beneath the date. Emily Parker, Table 3. Sometimes writing a thing down makes it more real. Sometimes it keeps you from letting someone else rewrite it later. The Riverside location smelled like cinnamon syrup and roasted espresso when I walked in. Normal. Comforting. A line already curled toward the door with office workers ordering their usuals. Oat milk lattes, cold brew, breakfast sandwiches wrapped in paper that always tore at the corners. Tom, my assistant manager, was behind the register. 36, loyal, sharp, one of the few people I trusted without effort. He took one look at my face and said, "You okay?" "Fine." He raised an eyebrow. I gave him the kind of smile people use when they want to shut a door politely. He let it go. That's one thing I appreciate about Tom. He understands the difference between concern and intrusion. I tied on an apron, checked inventory, reviewed a milk order, approved a pastry invoice, and tried to lose myself in movement. Busy hands, busy mind. Busy enough not to picture Daniel and Emily sitting beside each other under ballroom lights, while his parents nodded approval over plated salmon and polished speeches. But the mind does what it wants. By noon, I was pulling shots at the espresso machine, and all I could hear was Daniel's voice from the driveway. My parents like her. Not they invited a consultant because of business. Not the company asked her to attend. Not even it was a mistake. Just that simple, ugly truth. My parents like her. There are sentences that reveal more than the person speaking intends. That was one of them. Around 1:30, while Tom covered the front, I stepped into the back office and opened the shared vendor dashboard. Mostly out of habit. Partly because my mind kept circling the same ugly possibility. Velocity Cafe, the new place across town. They'd opened fast. Too fast. Sleek branding. Beautiful finish work. Staff fully trained from day one. Aggressive corporate discount packages that somehow always undercut my pricing by just enough to steal the account while still making money. At first I had blamed myself. Maybe I'd gotten comfortable. Maybe my branding was dated. Maybe another owner was simply hungrier. But when I reviewed the old bid comparisons again, a sick feeling spread low in my stomach. They hadn't been guessing. They'd been matching me too precisely, too often, too cleanly. Not just public menu prices, corporate rates, delivery structures, volume discounts, internal numbers. The kind of details no competitor should know unless someone handed them over. I clicked through access logs for the accounting software, a feature I almost never used. The screen loaded slowly, and while it did, I could hear the muffled rhythm of the shop outside. Grinder screaming, blender whirring, someone laughing too loudly near the pastry case. Then the log appeared. User access history. Admin review polls. File exports. I stared. Not because I understood everything instantly, because I understood enough. Late night logins. 9 p.m. 10 to 13. 9:57. Multiple dates over the last several months. Reports exported after closing. Vendor contracts opened. Pricing files accessed. Margin analysis downloaded. And under the user column, D. Collins, admin. I felt my hand go cold on the mouse. Daniel had admin access because years ago, I let him help streamline some household and payroll systems when we were combining financial planning. It was supposed to be temporary, then life got busy, and I never fully removed every permission. I should have fixed that. I sat back in the chair and looked at the screen again, slower this time, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. Every instinct I had was now awake. This wasn't about a dinner invitation anymore. This wasn't even just about humiliation. This was theft, or the edge of it, the shape of it. I printed the logs. Not all of them, just enough to begin. Then I folded the pages and slipped them into my bag. When I walked back out front, Tom glanced at me once and went still. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "Nothing I can explain yet." He nodded once. No drama, no questions, just that steady look that said he was paying attention. Daniel texted me at 3:42. "Running late tonight. Emily wanted to confirm final event details. Don't wait up." I stared at the message, not the words. The carelessness. The assumption that I would simply absorb that name again and again until it felt normal. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. In the end, I sent nothing. Silence can be a form of record, too. At 5:10, Gerald called. I answered before the first ring finished. "Tell me," I said. He exhaled slowly. "Michelle, I need you to come by the office tomorrow morning." My grip tightened on the phone. "What did you find?" Enough that I'd rather not discuss it on an open line. "Gerald." Another pause. Then, very carefully, "There are irregularities." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That happens sometimes when fear crosses into certainty. "What kind of irregularities?" "Transfers, withdrawals, some supporting documents I don't like." He lowered his voice. "Bring yourself in before opening if you can." "I'll be there." When the call ended, I stood motionless in the alley behind the shop. Delivery crates stacked beside the back door, cold air smelling faintly like rain and espresso grounds. Irregularities. Supporting documents. Documents he didn't like. The world didn't tilt. It narrowed. There's a difference. Tilting is panic. Narrowing is survival. Daniel came home after 9. He smelled like cologne and restaurant bourbon and the faint citrus soap from whatever upscale place he'd been meeting people. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop open, pretending to review payroll. He loosened his tie and smiled the careful smile of a man entering uncertain weather. "Long day?" "Yes." He poured himself water and stood across from me. For a moment, I thought he might say something honest, something useful. Instead, he went with easy. "Emily called again," he said. "She wanted to confirm the seating changes and speech order for Friday." I looked up slowly. "Speech order?" "Yeah, she's helping coordinate some guest flow details." Guest flow. The language of professional camouflage. He saw something in my face then, because his own expression hardened slightly. "Michelle, please don't do this again." "Do what?" "Take every business detail personally." I let that sit between us. Then I closed my laptop. "Since when is your ex-girlfriend a business detail?" He made a tired sound under his breath. "She's a consultant. She's at your table. She's working. She's in my seat." His jaw flexed. "This is exactly what I mean. You're turning this into something emotional when it's really not." For a second, I almost laughed. Because men like Daniel always say that when the emotion belongs to someone else. When the insult is too clean for them to admit out loud. I stood up. Not fast. Just enough to make him straighten. "When did Emily start consulting for MedTech?" I asked. "I told you I don't remember." "Try." His eyes narrowed. 6 months, maybe 7. Why?" "Because 6 or 7 months ago, my contracts began disappearing. Because 6 or 7 months ago, someone started downloading my pricing files. Because 6 or 7 months ago, the man I had built a life with might have started helping another woman build a business out of mine." But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. I just nodded like I was filing the answer away, which in fact I was. He went upstairs a few minutes later. I heard the shower turn on. I stayed in the kitchen alone, one hand resting against the back of the chair, staring at the dark window over the sink. My reflection looked older than it had a week ago. Not ruined, just altered, as if some final innocence had been removed by force. The next morning, I drove to Gerald's office before sunrise. He was already there. Files spread across his desk in neat stacks. Bank statements, transfer records, copies of checks, forms with signatures that looked like mine until you looked close enough to see they weren't. He didn't waste time. "There was $240,000 in your joint savings 3 years ago," he said. I sat down slowly. "Okay." Then, 18 months ago, an $80,000 withdrawal. He slid the paper toward me. Memo line. Investment opportunity. Signature. Mine. Except it wasn't. I stared at it. "That's not my signature." "I know," Gerald said. He handed me the next sheet. Then 69,000. Then 45. Then additional transfers broken smaller over time. I could hear my own breathing now. Slow. Controlled. Too controlled. "How much?" Gerald looked at me directly. "Just under 200,000 traced cleanly so far." The room went very quiet. My hands were flat on my knees, because if I touched the papers too soon, I thought I might tear them. Where did it go? He slid one final document across the desk. Wire destination. Parker Hospitality Ventures, LLC. I looked at the name once, twice, then up at him. But Parker, I said. Yes. Emily Parker? That would be my assumption. A sound came out of me then. Not a gasp, not a sob. Something emptier. The sound a person makes when a fear stops being a fear and becomes fact. Gerald wasn't done. There's more, he said quietly. He handed me another set of papers. System pull reports, admin access logs, vendor contracts, pricing files, export history, downloaded after hours, repeatedly, user credential, D. Collins. I didn't blink, didn't move, didn't trust myself to. Outside Gerald's office window, traffic moved through an ordinary morning. People carried coffee cups. A bus stopped at the corner. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. Inside that office, the life I had built with Daniel was rearranging itself into evidence. Not suspicion, not insecurity. Evidence. Emily wasn't just sitting at his table. She was sitting inside a business partly funded with my money. And Daniel hadn't just humiliated me. He had opened the door. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. Gerald watched me carefully from across the desk. In the 15 years he had handled my books, he'd seen every version of stress business ownership could create. Tax scares, expansion risks, cash flow weeks that ran too tight. But this was different. This wasn't business pressure. This was betrayal. And worse, it was organized. How long? I asked finally. Gerald tapped one of the statements with his pen. The first transfer was 18 months ago. 18 months. I let the number settle in my mind. A year and a half of quiet theft. A year and a half of dinners at the same kitchen table. School drop-offs. Holidays. Sunday mornings. All while money drained out of accounts I believed were safe. Could Daniel have done this without knowing? I asked. Gerald's silence answered before his words did. No. He slid another page toward me. This is the wire authorization document. My eyes moved slowly across the form. Account numbers. Transfer approval. Authorization credentials. Daniel's admin login had been used to verify the transaction. Even if Emily Parker had created the receiving company, Daniel had opened the door. Maybe he didn't start the plan. Maybe he convinced himself it was temporary. Maybe he believed he would put the money back. But somewhere along the way, he had decided my business and my trust were negotiable. I leaned back in the chair. Total damage? Gerald folded his hands. Direct transfers we can confirm. Just under 200,000. My throat tightened. Indirect? He hesitated. That's harder. How much harder? Velocity Cafe, he said quietly. If they're using your pricing structures and vendor contracts to undercut your corporate accounts. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Those lost contracts alone could be worth hundreds of thousands over time. Maybe more. So, I said slowly, my husband and his ex-girlfriend are using my money and my internal business data to build a competing cafe. Gerald didn't correct the statement. He just nodded once. The office felt very small. Legally, he said carefully, you need documentation. Every transaction. Every login record. Every communication, if possible. And personally, I asked? He looked at me for a long moment. That's your decision. Then he leaned forward slightly. But if you walk away from this marriage, Michelle, do it smart. I drove home in silence. The sky above the city was pale gray, the kind of winter morning where everything looks unfinished. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I expected anger. Instead, I saw something colder. Focus. Shock wears off faster when evidence replaces doubt. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my mind was already building a checklist. Documents. Access removal. Legal strategy. Containment. Daniel's car was gone. He had probably left early for another strategy meeting, or maybe breakfast with Emily Parker. At this point, either explanation felt equally plausible. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the same. The kitchen still smelled faintly like the cinnamon oatmeal Daniel liked in the mornings. The family calendar still hung on the wall. Madison's college schedule was pinned beside grocery lists and dentist appointments. Normal life. Built on something I had mistaken for honesty. I walked upstairs to the bedroom. Daniel's closet door was half open. His suits hung in neat rows. Tailored jackets. Crisp shirts. The uniform of a man who understood presentation. I wondered how many nights he had logged into my systems after I'd gone to sleep. How many times he had sat in this room downloading vendor contracts while I believed we were building a future together. The thought didn't make me cry. It made something inside me settle. Clarity is dangerous. Once you see the full shape of betrayal, you can't pretend it's smaller. I called Patricia Hendricks at 11. She answered with the brisk calm of someone who had spent decades solving ugly problems. Michelle, she said, what can I do for you? I need to retain you. There was a pause. Family law? Yes. Come to the office, she said immediately. Patricia Hendricks was 56 and had the reputation of being the most formidable divorce attorney in the metro. Not loud, not theatrical, just precise. Her office overlooked the river, a wall of windows behind her desk reflecting pale winter sunlight. I laid the documents out in front of her. Bank transfers, admin logs, Gerald's notes. She read without interrupting. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair. Well, she said, that's unpleasant. That's one word for it. She folded her hands. You're married 21 years? Yes. 3 children? Yes. Business is fully in your name? Yes. She nodded. That helps. She tapped the wire transfer documents. This is potentially criminal. Wire fraud. Identity theft. Forgery. And depending on how the business information was used, she looked up. Corporate espionage. The word sounded surreal in the quiet office. Can we prove it? I asked. With documentation like this? She smiled slightly. Discovery is a beautiful thing. Patricia stood and walked to the window. For now, she continued, we move carefully. What does carefully look like? First, you protect your assets. Remove yourself from joint financial exposure. Second, we prepare separation papers. Third, we document everything before confrontation. I nodded slowly. And Daniel? She turned back toward me. You don't warn him. Why? Because people destroy evidence when they panic. Her tone was matter of fact. You hit first. You hit clean. And you let the law do the rest. I left Patricia's office 90 minutes later with a folder and a plan. The first call I made was to Gerald. Transfer my half of the joint accounts into my business account, I said. Today. Understood. Remove my name from any shared authorizations. Credit cards. Utilities. Everything. He didn't ask questions. Gerald knew the difference between a client venting and a client executing a strategy. Next, I stopped at a storage facility 2 miles from the house. 2 weeks earlier, I had rented a small unit under the business name. At the time, it was meant for seasonal equipment. Now it would hold something else. Insurance. That afternoon, I returned home and began packing. Not clothes first. Documents. Tax records. Laptop backups. Business contracts. Gerald's printed reports. The quiet artifacts of a life that suddenly needed protecting. Each folder went into a box. Each box into my car. Back and forth. 3 trips. The house stayed silent around me. The kind of silence that exists in places where people believe nothing important is changing. By 6 p.m., the essential pieces were gone. What remained were the things Daniel expected to see. Furniture. Pictures. The illusion of normal. Daniel texted around 7. Dinner meeting running late again. I stared at the message. Then I typed, hope it goes well. A minute later, he sent a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. Later that evening, I walked through the house one last time. The living room where our kids had built blanket forts. The kitchen where Daniel and I once argued about paint colors for the cabinets. The hallway where Madison used to race her brothers before school. 17 years of life lived inside these walls. But houses don't hold loyalty. People do. And one of the people who promised me that loyalty had spent 18 months dismantling it. I went into the kitchen and looked at the counter beside the coffee maker. Then I slipped my wedding ring off my finger. The gold band felt lighter than it should have. I placed it on the counter, right where Daniel would see it in the morning. No note. No explanation. Just absence. Sometimes silence says everything. That night I didn't stay in the house. I checked into an extended stay hotel downtown. The room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and recycled air. Not comfortable, but neutral. I ordered a burger from the restaurant downstairs. Turned on a baseball game I didn't care about. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not peacefully, but deeply. The hardest part, the doubt, was gone. Now there was only the next move. Saturday morning, my phone rang at 9. Daniel. I watched the screen for a moment before answering. Where are you? He asked immediately. I leaned back against the hotel headboard. How was the party? I asked. A pause. What? The celebration, I said. Metropolitan Club. 7 p.m. Table 3. I let the words settle. Did Emily enjoy sitting with your parents in my seat? Daniel exhaled sharply. Michelle, if this is about the seating arrangements, it's not. Silence. Then I said the number. $200,000. The air on the other end of the line changed instantly. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Yes, I replied quietly. You do. For a few seconds, Daniel didn't speak, but I could hear him breathing. Short, controlled. The way people breathe when their brain is moving faster than their mouth. $200,000, I repeated calmly. Still silence. Then Daniel cleared his throat. I have no idea what you're talking about, Michelle. His voice sounded steady. Too steady. The kind of steadiness people practice. I leaned my head back against the pillow. You want me to be specific? I asked. Because I can be. Another pause. Then I started listing things. Parker Hospitality Ventures. A wire transfer 18 months ago for $80,000. Two more transfers after that. Admin access downloads from my accounting software. Vendor contracts. Pricing reports. Late night logins under your credentials. Each sentence landed like a stone. By the time I finished, Daniel wasn't breathing quietly anymore. "Where did you get that information?" he said. His voice had changed. The calm was gone. Now there was something sharp underneath it. "That's not the question you should be asking," I replied. "The question you should be asking is whether you want to explain it before lawyers get involved. You're accusing me of something insane. I'm describing documented transactions." "Michelle, you forged my signature." The words sat between us. Heavy, ugly, real. Daniel exhaled loudly. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes." "Then it'll be very easy to explain to a judge." Another silence followed. Then he tried a different tone. Softer. Negotiating. "Look," he said carefully, "Emily had an investment opportunity." "Of course she did." I closed my eyes. "And you decided to fund it with my money?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" "We were going to pay it back." There it was. Not denial. Just justification. I felt something inside me settle even further. "You stole from me," I said. "It wasn't stealing." "You forged my name." "We were going to return it." "You helped your ex build a competitor using my pricing data." "That's not what happened." "It's exactly what happened." Daniel's breathing grew louder. "Michelle, you're blowing this out of proportion." I almost admired his persistence. "Out of proportion?" I said. "Daniel, wire fraud is a felony." That shut him up. Completely. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded smaller. "Where are you?" "A hotel." "You left?" "Yes." "You're seriously doing this?" "I already did." "What does that mean?" "It means Monday morning you're being served separation papers." The silence that followed was different from the earlier ones. Before, Daniel had been calculating. Now he was realizing. "You talked to a lawyer?" "Yes." "And what about the kids?" he demanded. "They'll know the truth." "Michelle, don't drag them into this." "I didn't drag them anywhere." "You did." "You made sure of that the moment you forged my name." He exhaled sharply. "You can't just accuse me of crimes and walk away." "I'm not accusing you. I'm documenting you." "And Daniel?" "Yes?" "I'm filing a police report Tuesday morning." "You can't do that." "Watch me. You'll destroy everything." "You already did." Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was Madison, our oldest. Her message was short. "Dad says something weird is going on. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Madison had always been perceptive. Even as a kid, she noticed things most people missed. The tension in a room, the pause between sentences. The moment someone stopped telling the truth, I typed slowly. "I'm okay, we'll talk soon." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Grandma called me yesterday." That made my stomach tighten. "Daniel's mother." "Of course." Madison's next message came seconds later. She said Dad's promotion party was complicated. I sighed. Even now they were managing the narrative. Smoothing edges, controlling appearances. I typed again. "There are things you don't know yet, but you will." Madison didn't respond for almost a minute. Then, "I'm driving home tonight." I closed my eyes. Somewhere deep down I had expected that. Madison had always chosen confrontation over confusion. Just like me. Monday morning, Patricia filed the separation papers. Daniel was served at his office. He called 5 times before noon. I didn't answer. Instead, I met Patricia in her office again while she reviewed the next phase. "We filed for separation and asset protection," she said. "Good. Now comes discovery." "What does that involve?" She smiled faintly. "Everything. Financial records, communication history, corporate ties. If Parker Hospitality Ventures used stolen funds." She tapped the folder. "They'll have to explain it." "And Emily Parker?" I asked. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Oh, she's going to be very interesting." 3 weeks later, Patricia called me on a gray Thursday afternoon while I was closing the downtown cafe. Her voice sounded sharper than usual. "Michelle," she said. "Yes?" "This situation is worse than we thought." I sat down in the office chair. "Explain." "The forensic accountant found additional transactions." "How much?" "Not much more money." "Then what?" She paused. "A pattern." "With Emily?" "Yes." Parker Hospitality Ventures was involved in a fraud case in Oregon 3 years ago. My stomach tightened. "A lawsuit?" "Settled out of court." "That doesn't prove anything." "No," Patricia said. "But it suggests this wasn't her first attempt." I leaned forward. "So Daniel wasn't just manipulated." "No, he was part of it." "That's the direction this is pointing." Patricia's voice softened slightly. "Michelle, prosecutors are getting interested." "Why?" "Because what we're looking at might qualify as racketeering." I stared at the office wall. "Racketeering." That word belonged in crime documentaries. Not in my marriage. "What happens next?" I asked quietly. "Now," Patricia said, "everything starts collapsing."